are talking All Hallows Eve Trickster, and this is actually an anthology movie and is the third in the All Hallows Eve series of anthology movies. The first one, I suppose, is notable for the first appearance of Art the Clown, who went on to star in the Terrifier movies. So this one has 6 stories with a kind of wraparound segment. I wouldn't really call it a kind of story exactly. The wraparound segment effectively has a woman being kind of held in this kind of box and kind of looking out like a peephole and sees various kind of like CGI horror imagery, and that's kind of really all that is. So let's talk about these 6 stories in a little bit more detail and give our thoughts overall. So in no particular order, the first one I'll talk about is called Pretty Face. And this is effectively like a kind of Halloween, Michael Myers style kind of slasher movie where we have a kind of serial killer slasher going around killing people dressed up in a kind of like makeup and basically a pretty face. I didn't think it was too bad, but there was nothing particularly memorable about it. It very much feels like a kind of Halloween clone to a degree. It's fine if you like slasher movies, you know, and that kind of just a generic kind of slasher film. There's a couple of kills. The kill looks quite, you know, interesting, but it didn't kind of do anything outside of what you haven't seen before. So there you go. The next one is PoPoorGlender, and this was about an older woman whose son has somehow transformed into this kind of grotesque creature that's living in the kind of the basement, and the son is now demanding fresh meat. Inevitably she ends up kind of feeding it, or trying to feed it, kind of humans. What will happen? Well, I'm not telling you, you have to watch it. This one was quite a fun one. You know, good use of kind of VFX, practical kind of VFX here. It doesn't give you much context about what's going on or why. You know, you just have to kind of just go with it. I mean, this is maybe the problem with kind of short films. Obviously, they because of the short running time, it's straight to the point. But you get the kind of the gist about what's kind of going on ultimately. There's some decent practical effects, and you know, a couple of fairly good kind of horror sequences. A quite a fun one. The ending is really foreshadowed, I have to say. It's very, you see something and you think, well, that's going to play a part, and inevitably it does. It ends a little bit abruptly, I thought, but it was a kind of a fun one. The next one is called Witch Hunt, and this is one of 2 films where I feel it has a good concept which didn't really take advantage of. This one, effectively, we have this guy who sends people on a witch hunt on social media, and that's the kind of the gag here, is that, you know, witch hunts referring to, you know, people getting cancelled and stuff like that. So he's out effectively creating problems for people online by doctoring photos and stuff, and he seems to be visited by maybe a genuine kind of like witch, and to teach him a lesson, so to speak. Like I said, I think the online witch hunt aspect of it, I think, is a good idea, but it didn't really pay off all that much. I didn't think. I thought it was kind of like, well, it ends up just being, you know, this guy ends up getting kind of preyed upon himself. But the whole online witch hunt angle could have been played more and could have been a neat and a bit more unusual element that we haven't seen before. But it was really just an introduction to putting this guy in peril. And the next one is a similar kind of missed opportunity, if you ask me. This one was called That Halloween, and this is the first movie that is played. And this is about a bunch of kids who are in this kind of abandoned house telling each other kind of the history that's happened in this house, where there was this serial killer some decades before. At the same time, there seems to be a kind of like a haunting in this house where like recreations of the events of this kind of serial killer seem to be playing out in front of these children. Now, the element that is introduced here is that they seem to be able to somewhat affect the past, thing like by knocking things over and stuff, and so the ghosts end up sort of interacting with the stimuli that these kids are kind of like, you know, doing in the future. Sounds like a good concept where you can kind of change the past and kind of manipulate things. It's a kind of a wasted concept because they don't really do anything with it. It's introduced, and then ultimately nothing is done with it, and so it ends up being, you know, somewhat of a missed opportunity, unfortunately. So, yeah, good idea, but squandered. The acting and the young kids of this one, I think the acting of this one was quite weak, I have to say. And I hate to say it about kids, but it was a little bit cringy at times, to be honest with you. Next one is Karaoke Night. This is a very short one, but certainly the most out there and bizarre. It's about this kind of sleazy guy who is at a kind of karaoke bar and kind of hits on a girl, and he ends up having his worst night possible in very grotesque ways. This one kind of feels like you're at a war concert, is the best way I would sort of describe it. It's the most overt in regards to sort of gore and violence. It is done in a kind of, as I say, like a war concert. It's not exactly realistic VFX or anything, but it's kind of like, you know, sillier kind of, but over the top kind of gore and things like that. I think it was quite fun, I have to say. This one was one of the ones that I think definitely was a more memorable one. Very short. The VFX arguably look knowingly schlocky. I think the whole idea here is that these VFX are a little bit on the kind of the pantomime side, which adds to the kind of the bizarreness of it. But it is worth pointing out that I feel some people may be, well, that looks really rubbish. There you go. And then the one I felt was the strongest was called Nagul the Sin Eater, and this is that one that's set in the Old West, and about these two outlaws who are both wounded, who are kind of struggling through the desert and ultimately turn on each other. But there is a mysterious figure who's dressed like a nun sort of comes towards them, and you know, there's a little bit more than meets the eye in that one. This one has a quite a nice production value. It kind of feels like it's a period piece and does it quite well. The acting was strong. I thought it had quite a good, if not predictable, a little bit of it, you know, a good arc in the story, and some pretty decent kind of VFX. This to me was by far and away the strongest out of the kind of the six movies. And then we have obviously the wraparound, which is just a bizarre series of images which have the almost probably some of the more overt horror stuff in it, but there's no context to the story. It's just a bunch of images. So, I mean, the stories here were a collection of short films that are made, I believe, from 2019 to 2021 have been sort of collected. So they're not made for this anthology. It's kind of a unrelated films. And part of the problem that I have with anthology movies in general is because they're obviously a short running time, you don't really get a lot of kind of characters and character growth. You don't really feel you know the characters, and there are certain plot points here that are just kind of breeze past. It's the nature of the game here with anthologies, and it's something why I struggle to kind of find them that interesting. For me, this package as a whole, there's a couple of shorts that I did enjoy, the Nagul and Karaoke Night. PoPoorGlender, which is the one with the kind of the creature in the basement that was the sun, was quite fun, although a little, you know, again a little bit too obvious foreshadowing and stuff. The other ones, I've got to say, they weren't bad. They were just kind of forgettable. I will say, as an overall, the stories were at worst kind of like generic and kind of like unmemorable, but never bad. And you know, there is a couple of decent ones here. So as a general package overall, I would say it pushes it slightly above average for me, to a 6 out of 10. So not a bad anthology. A couple of kind of like fun ones, but also a couple of, although not bad, I think very unmemorable and somewhat generic ones. 6 out of 10. I don't think there's anything going to be kind of quite as long-lasting as the Terrifier movies that obviously was spawned from the original All Hallows Eve film, but there you go. Have you seen any of these All Hallows Eve films? And please do let me know what your thoughts are, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye.